In the village, there lived a chief who everyone called Chief Kalu. At first, he seemed kind and fair. He wore bright coral beads around his neck and always carried a long wooden staff to show he was the leader. The villagers trusted him and looked up to him because they believed he would protect them and their land. Every day, farmers worked hard in their fields, women sold yams, cassava, and vegetables at the market, and children ran laughing through the dusty paths. Life in the village was peaceful. People respected each other, and every important decision began with pouring libation to the ancestors. But Chief Kalu was different. Inside, he was proud and greedy, though nobody knew it at first. Time passed, and his greed grew bigger than the village itself. He began to demand extra money and food from the villagers. He took goats, chickens, rice, and even the little money people kept for school fees. When the elders tried to warn him, he laughed loudly, a sound that sent shivers through the people. "I am the chief," he would shout. "Even the ancestors must respect me. No one can stop me." The villagers feared him, but said nothing openly. They whispered among themselves about how pride always brings trouble, hoping the chief would change before it was too late. Even the children noticed the change. The kind man who once smiled at them had now become distant and cold. He spent more time sitting on his wooden throne, counting what he had taken, and less time speaking to the people. The elders warned him again. "Chief, respect the ancestors and your people. Greed will destroy you." But he only waved his staff and said, "I fear nothing. Not man, not spirit, not the ancestors. I am the master now." Deep in the village, some elders exchanged worried glances. They knew challenging the ancestors was dangerous. Still, they waited to see what the chief would do next, hoping that the spirit of the village would protect them. The people could feel that something bad was coming. Farmers returned late from the fields, speaking in hushed voices. Women at the market spoke of strange winds and animals acting oddly. Even the children noticed that the forest behind the village, usually full of bird songs, had become quiet. A sense of unease spread, but Chief Kalu ignored it. He only cared about his power, believing he could control everything, even the spirits of the ancestors. His heart was blind to the warnings, and soon, that blindness would take him to the edge of a danger he had never imagined. Behind the village lay a dense, sacred forest. It was a place the villagers rarely entered. They believed the ancestors lived there, watching over the people, and any who disrespected it risked great misfortune. An ancient tree stood in the heart of the forest, so old that its roots seemed to hold the secrets of the world. The elders always said, "The spirits of the ancestors live in the forest. Go there with respect, or you will feel their anger." One evening, as the sun sank behind the hills, strong winds blew through the village. The dust swirled in the air, and even the chickens hid in their coops. Papa Obi, the oldest elder in the village, shook his head in worry. He knew the signs. That night, he visited Chief Kalu in his house. "Chief," he said, lowering his voice, "the ancestors are not happy. Your greed and pride anger them. Change your ways before it is too late." But Chief Kalu only laughed, louder than ever. "Change my ways. I fear no spirit. I am the chief. I can do as I please. If the ancestors are real, I will go to the forest tomorrow and see them for myself." His voice echoed through the house, scaring the children hiding in the corners. Papa Obi sighed deeply, knowing that once a man challenges the ancestors, the consequences are not easily avoided. The villagers heard rumors the next morning. People peeked from their windows and saw the chief walking toward the sacred forest. A few brave young men followed from a distance, worried about what might happen. The forest was silent, too silent. Even the birds had stopped singing, and the wind seemed to whisper warnings. As the chief entered the shadow of the ancient tree, he raised his staff and shouted, "Ancestor, show yourself. I am the chief, and I fear no one." A sudden darkness fell over the forest. The wind swirled faster, lifting leaves and dust in a circle around him. A voice deep and powerful came from everywhere. "Kalu, you have been warned. Greed and pride are dangerous." The chief froze. Fear, a feeling he had never known, crept into his heart. The ground trembled lightly beneath him, and he realized that the ancestors were real, and they were not pleased. The chief stood under the shadow of the ancient tree, his heart beating faster than ever before. The forest around him was unusually quiet. Not a single bird sang, not a single leaf rustled. The wind had stopped, as if the forest itself was holding its breath. Chief Kalu raised his staff high and shouted with all the pride in his heart, "Ancestor, I am Chief Kalu. If you are real, show yourself. I fear nothing." For a moment, there was silence. Then, a deep, booming voice echoed from everywhere. "Kalu," it called, slow and heavy, shaking the air around him. The chief's legs trembled. He had faced storms, thieves, and wild animals, but nothing had ever made him feel this small. The ground beneath his feet shook lightly, and the roots of the ancient tree seemed to twist toward him, like fingers pointing in warning. The chief wanted to shout again, to prove his strength, but his voice caught in his throat. From the edge of the forest, some young men from the village watched nervously. They had followed the chief, hoping to protect him if danger came. Now, seeing the ground shake and hearing the deep voice, their courage vanished. They ran back toward the village screaming, "The forest! The forest! The ancestor is angry." Their voices echoed through the trees and seemed to make the forest tremble even more. Chief Kalu was alone now, facing something far stronger than he could imagine. The voice spoke again, louder and clearer. "You were chosen to protect your people, not to steal from them. You have angered the ancestors with your greed. Power without respect brings only shame and pain." Chief Kalu's hands shook as he held the staff. He wanted to run, but the forest seemed to close in around him, slowing his steps. Panic filled his heart. He had never felt fear like this before. He dropped to his knees, begging silently, "Please, I am the chief. I will change. I will respect the people. I will respect you." But the voice continued, calm yet powerful. "Words alone are empty, Kalu. Only action can show humility and courage. You have taken too much. You have disrespected those who came before you. Now you must feel the weight of your choices." A sudden wind whipped through the forest, lifting dust and leaves around him. His coral beads broke and fell to the ground with a loud clatter. The staff slipped from his hands. He tried to shout again, but no sound came out. He fell forward, face to the ground, realizing for the first time that power without respect could not protect him. The forest, the tree, and the voice reminded him that the ancestors were real, and they watched every action in the village. Chief Kalu had thought he could challenge the spirits, that he could deny them like he defied the elders. Now, lying under the ancient tree, he understood how wrong he was. The forest was alive, powerful, and just, and the journey to earn back respect, to regain the trust of the ancestors, had only just begun. Chief Kalu stumbled out of the forest the next morning, his heart heavy and his mind full of fear. The young men who had followed him ran back to the village first, shouting warnings to anyone who would listen. "The ancestor is angry. The chief has angered the spirits." The villagers came running, clutching their children, eyes wide with worry. Even the elders, who had warned the chief many times, felt a chill down their spines. The chief tried to speak when he reached the village square, but no sound came out. His lips moved, but there were only silent whispers. The villagers watched, shocked. Papa Obi, the oldest elder, stepped forward and looked at him with sad eyes. "The ancestors have punished you, Kalu," he said softly. "They do not take lightly those who steal from their people and show no respect. Only humility and true change can restore your voice and your power." For the first time in his life, Chief Kalu felt helpless. He could not order anyone, could not take anything, could not even speak to defend himself. The villagers, who had once feared him, now walked past him without worry. Children ran close, daring to peek at the man who had once seemed so powerful. Women whispered to each other, "The spirits have shown him who truly rules the village." The chief felt shame burn hotter than the midday sun. Days passed, and nothing changed. Chief Kalu's voice did not return. He watched from his hut as people worked together, shared food, and helped each other build new huts and repair broken fences. He noticed that the village was calmer, happier, and more united than ever before. Even without his commands, the people organized themselves. It dawned on him that true leadership was not about fear or wealth. It was about respect, fairness, and care for everyone. The chief tried to ask the elders for advice, writing words in the dirt with a stick. Papa Obi read each one and nodded. "Kalu," he said, "your greed has caused suffering, and the ancestors have taught you a lesson. If you want to return to your place as leader, you must show humility, return what you have taken, and serve the people as they deserve." The chief lowered his head. Every day, he remembered the wind that shook the forest, the booming voice, and the fear he had felt under the ancient tree. He realized that the punishment was not cruel. It was necessary to save him from destroying everything. For the first time, Chief Kalu began to work alongside the villagers. He carried water, repaired roofs, and helped plant crops. He could not speak, but his actions said more than words ever could. Slowly, the people began to notice that the chief was changing. While the punishment had been harsh, it had opened his eyes. He was no longer the proud man who challenged the ancestors. He was learning that true strength came from humility, honesty, and respect for the people and the spirits who protected them. The villagers still watched him closely, wary of old habits returning. But they also hoped that this lesson would last. Chief Kalu had begun a long journey, a journey of repentance and change. And in that journey, he would discover that no power in the world, not even his title or coral beads, could match the wisdom of the ancestors. Days turned into weeks, and Chief Kalu remained unable to speak. At first, the villagers were unsure what to do. The man who once ruled with fear could no longer give orders, collect taxes, or take what he wanted. Children played near him without fear, women passed him in the market without worry, and even the young men who once followed his every command began to ignore him. The chief watched it all silently, feeling a strange mix of shame and realization. Without his voice, Chief Kalu had to rely on actions instead of words. He began helping the villagers wherever he could. He carried heavy water pots from the well, repaired broken fences, and cleared fallen trees from the paths. At first, some villagers doubted his intentions. "He only helps because he is scared," they whispered. But slowly, as days went by, they saw something different. The chief worked tirelessly, never asking for reward or praise. His hands grew calloused, and his back ached, but he never complained. This change surprised everyone, most of all himself. Papa Obi, the elder, watched quietly from a distance. He had warned Chief Kalu many times, yet he also knew the chief had a chance to change. "True leaders are made in humility, not in fear," he told the villagers one morning. "The chief is learning, but it will take time before the ancestors are satisfied." Children gathered around Chief Kalu as he worked, curious about the man who could no longer speak. He smiled at them, gesturing with his hands and pointing at the tasks that needed doing. For the first time, the villagers saw a leader who served rather than demanded. The chief also began returning some of what he had taken. He brought goats back to the owners who had lost them, gave rice to widows, and returned small coins to children who had been saving for school. Each act of kindness felt heavy at first, because he had once taken these things with pride. But as the villagers accepted his gifts, something changed in Chief Kalu's heart. He began to feel joy, not from taking, but from giving. It was a joy he had never known before, and it humbled him deeply. Even though he could not speak, the villagers slowly began to trust him again. They started seeking his advice with gestures and signs, realizing that leadership was not about words alone, but about wisdom, care, and fairness. Chief Kalu learned to listen, to watch, and to act. The silence that had once felt like punishment now became his teacher. Every day, he remembered the wind that had shaken him in the sacred forest, the booming voice that had echoed in his ears, and the fear that had first opened his heart to change. By the end of the weeks, Chief Kalu had earned a new kind of respect. People no longer feared him, they admired him. He had become a silent leader, learning lessons no crown or coral beads could teach. And though his voice was still gone, he understood more clearly than ever that true leadership came from humility, honesty, and service to the people. The ancestors had punished him, but through their warning, they had also given him a second chance, one he would never take for granted. Weeks passed, and Chief Kalu's life had completely changed. The man who once demanded respect and wealth now worked quietly alongside the villagers. Every day, he carried water from the well, helped repair huts, and cleared the paths after storms. He could no longer speak, yet his actions spoke louder than any words. Slowly, the villagers began to see a new side of him, one that cared, one that listened, and one that understood what it meant to truly serve the people. One night, as the sun set and the sky turned orange and purple, Chief Kalu went to Papa Obi's house. He carried a basket of yams and a small jar of palm oil as gifts to show respect and apology. Kneeling at the elder's doorstep, he gestured, bowing his head low. Papa Obi looked at him with kind eyes and nodded. "Kalu," he said, "you are learning the greatest lesson a leader can learn. True power is not taken with greed. It is earned through service and humility." Chief Kalu spent many nights reflecting on his mistakes. He remembered the booming voice in the forest, the shaking ground, and the fear that had paralyzed him. For the first time, he realized that his greed had not only hurt him, but had also caused suffering for everyone in the village. He thought of the widows who had lost goats, the children who had no coins for school, and the farmers who had been forced to give more than they could afford. The chief's heart ached with regret. Over the next few days, he worked even harder to make amends. He helped widows fetch water, carried heavy loads of yams to the market, and shared his remaining wealth with families who needed it most. Every act of kindness strengthened the trust between him and the villagers. Children followed him through the village, laughing and helping where they could. Women smiled at him with cautious hope, and even the young men who had once feared him now respected his efforts. Chief Kalu was learning that humility was more powerful than fear, more lasting than wealth, and far stronger than pride. Papa Obi watched silently from a distance, proud of the change he had witnessed. "The ancestors are pleased," he whispered to the villagers. "Kalu is learning to serve. This is the way of true leadership. Only the humble can lead with wisdom." The villagers nodded quietly, realizing that even a proud and greedy man could change if he truly learned from his mistakes. By the end of the week, Chief Kalu had become unrecognizable, not in appearance but in spirit. His hands were rough from work, his back ached from labor, and his face bore the marks of long days of service. Yet his eyes shone with something new: understanding, compassion, and respect. He no longer needed words to show the villagers he had changed. Every action he took demonstrated the lesson he had learned from the forest, the ancestors, and the punishment that had humbled him. That night, as Chief Kalu lay under the stars, he whispered silently to himself, "I will never forget this lesson. Humility is the true strength of a leader. I am nothing without the people, and I am nothing without the ancestors." For the first time, he felt at peace. The journey of punishment and repentance had taught him what power truly meant. And from that day on, Chief Kalu knew he could never again let greed rule his heart. Months passed since Chief Kalu had first entered the sacred forest, and the village had slowly returned to peace. Children played freely, farmers worked their fields, and neighbors shared their food with one another. Chief Kalu had become a familiar sight everywhere, carrying water, repairing huts, helping in the market, and doing tasks he had once considered beneath a chief. Though he could not speak, the villagers had begun to see him in a new light, not as a greedy ruler, but as a man who had learned humility. One quiet night, as the village lay under a blanket of stars, a soft wind blew across the fields. Chief Kalu, sitting outside his small hut, felt a strange warmth and calmness in the air. In his heart, he remembered the booming voice from the sacred forest, the shaking earth, and the fear that had once paralyzed him. He had lived through punishment, learned to serve, and repented sincerely. The wind seemed to whisper through the trees, calling to him. Slowly, a voice, gentle this time, echoed in his mind. "Kalu, you have learned." The chief's heart leapt with hope. Could the ancestors finally forgive him? He felt tears fill his eyes, though his lips could not form a sound. In that moment, the silence that had been his punishment transformed into a blessing. He realized that the ancestors were not cruel. They had only wanted him to understand what true leadership meant. He bowed deeply toward the forest, a silent gesture of respect and gratitude. The next morning, the villagers noticed something different. Chief Kalu, still unable to speak, seemed lighter in step and calmer in spirit. He called the children together, gesturing and smiling, showing them the value of kindness and cooperation. The elders, observing from a distance, nodded knowingly. Papa Obi said, "The ancestors have shown mercy. Kalu's heart has changed, and that is the true reward. From now on, he will lead with wisdom, and the village will prosper." In the days that followed, Chief Kalu's voice slowly returned. One morning, standing before the villagers in the square, he cleared his throat and spoke for the first time in months. "People of the village," he said, his voice shaking at first, "I have wronged you. I was proud and greedy. I did not respect the ancestors, and I did not serve you as I should. I am sorry. I promise to lead with fairness, care, and humility." The villagers gasped in surprise, then cheered. Children laughed and ran to him. Women smiled, and even the young men who had once feared him nodded with respect. From that day on, Chief Kalu ruled differently. He listened to the elders, shared resources fairly, and helped the villagers whenever he could. The forest behind the village remained sacred, a reminder that the ancestors watched over them and that greed and pride could never triumph over wisdom and humility. Chief Kalu had learned his greatest lesson. Mercy is given to those who are willing to change, and true leadership comes from serving others, not from ruling with fear. From that day on, the village changed. The people worked together in harmony, helping each other plant crops, repair houses, and share food. The fear that once ruled the village vanished. Children ran through the dusty paths laughing. Women carried baskets of yams and cassava without worry, and farmers tilled the fields knowing their efforts would benefit everyone. Even the forest behind the village, once a place of mystery and fear, became a symbol of respect and wisdom. The villagers learned that the ancestors were always watching, and their guidance could bring both warning and mercy. Chief Kalu had changed more than the village. He had changed himself. No longer proud or greedy, he worked alongside the people he once oppressed. He helped repair broken roofs, carried water from the well, and shared what little wealth he still had. He listened to the villagers, taking their advice and considering their needs. His actions showed humility, patience, and care. The people began to trust him again, not because they feared him, but because they saw he had learned from his mistakes. Children ran to him for help, and elders nodded in approval. The chief's heart had softened, and in that softness, he found true strength. One evening, as the sun set behind the trees, Chief Kalu walked quietly to the edge of the sacred forest. The air was calm, the wind gentle, and the leaves rustled softly. He knelt before the ancient tree, placing his hands together in respect. "I have learned," he whispered silently. "I will serve the people and honor the ancestors." At that moment, a soft light seemed to shine through the forest, and the wind carried a feeling of peace. The ancestors had seen his repentance. They had witnessed his change. Their mercy had returned balance to the village, and their lesson would never be forgotten. From that day forward, parents in the village told their children the story of Chief Kalu, the greedy chief who had once challenged the ancestors. They told how pride and greed could bring punishment, but how humility and service could bring mercy. They spoke of how the chief had lost his voice, learned to serve, and finally earned the forgiveness of the spirits and the respect of the people. Children listened wide-eyed, imagining the booming voice from the forest, the shaking ancient tree, and the wind that carried both fear and mercy. And so, the story became a lesson for every generation. The village thrived, guided by the memory of the past. Chief Kalu, now older and wiser, continued to lead with fairness and care. The people no longer feared him, they respected him. The forest remained sacred, the ancestors remained watchful, and the story of the greedy chief became a story never forgotten. A story told around fires, at festivals,